Alright, so welcome back to another Behringer guide, and in this case we are going to talk about the Neutron. Now this is not a review, this is a complete guide, so we will talk about every single knob, every single function, every single button, everything that this synthesizer can do. Now this is going to be divided on two different videos. The first one, which is this one, is going to be about the whole panel without the patch bay, and on the next one we are going to talk just about the patch bay. In that one, I'm going to go in Ninja mode, and we will go patch bay by patch bay. We're going to talk about what the patch bay is, how it works, and what, each single property can do. And we are going to, of course, provide different examples. But in this one, we will talk about the synth without the patch bay. Now, the synthesizer looks very simple, but it's super complete. It can do a million things and it has a lot of hidden features. Now, remember that this video, it's time-coded and it's divided into different sections. So you can go to the timeline and watch the section that you care. And we're going to go in steps, oscillators, then filters. Then we're going to go to the envelopes, LFOs, and then overdrive, delays, and all this section that we have right here. Now, of course, remember to subscribe and like the video if you like this, and if you have the money and you can afford it, check the link to Patreon, and you can support the channel on Patreon so you can keep the channel going and keep the videos flowing. So since we're going to go section by section, we're going to need to have a common kind of a ground. So we are going to start from a default patch, let's say. So all the knobs right here are going to be down. That's going to be my default patch. The attacks, the envelopes, attack, all, down, down, this one all the way up, and this one's all the way up. Then the overdrive, we're not going to use it at the beginning, so I'm going to say that we are at the middle. The delay all the way down, the three knobs. Then right here, the bias all down, then all the way down, 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 and off. And on the filters, the filter all the way up, the frequency all the way up, then the resonance all the way down, and this one down, and this one down. And in terms of the the oscillators, the VCOs, we are going to use a saw right here and a saw on the number 2. They're going to be right in the middle, the blends right in the middle, and then the width controls are going to be right at the middle, and nothing selected right here. That's going to be my default patch. Right, so we will go through different sections. So you need to know how the synth works behind the scenes. First, it goes, the oscillators, you get the oscillators. Then it goes through the filters, and then you have the envelope, of course. Then what it does, it's going to go through the overdrive section. Then it's going to go through the envelope, which is the VCA, and then the VCA will go pretty much to the delay. So the delay is something on this synthesizer that you cannot bypass. You can bypass the overdrive, and the overdrive brings a little bit of tone. It's a little bit magical. But in this case, since we are learning the synthesizer, what I would like to do, I would like to remove the overdrive from the equation. So we are going to be patching this case, and it's the only patch we're going to do for now. The out of the BCF to the in of the BCA in. So this patch, I'm going to leave it connected. And this, what it does, is going to remove the overdrive, pretty much. So the chain now is going to be directly going to the delay and then the output. So if I press something, you need to go down in volume, because this kind of controls the volume and levels down the volume. So if you go down, it's already pretty loud. Okay, so we're going to start first with the VCOs and then move up. So the first knob, of course, we're going to start simple. It's going to be the oscillator mix. This is going to, of course, create a blend between the oscillator number 1 and the oscillator number 2. So if I move all the way to, to the left side, I'm just hearing this VCO. And if I go all the way to the other one, I'm just hearing this VCO. So what you get is a mix of both if you go to the middle, right there. All right. So then, of course, you get the most classic waveforms. So you get a triangle, then you get, a sine wave, then you get a triangle, then you get a saw right there, then you get a square, and then you get something that is called the tone mod. So the oscillators right here is the control. The shape is going to select the waveform, and by default is going to be set to morph, right? So if I go all the way to the oscillator number A to this one, and I go all the way down, you're going to get that sine wave. You can see it right there on the oscilloscope. And as I go up, it's going to kind of a morph between the next waveform. That's the triangle. That's going to be the saw. And then you get the other ones. But you notice that you have this morphing, right? It's kind of a fading between the waveforms. Now, what if you don't want this morphing? So what you can do, you can hold down the range button. You just tap and hold, And then you're going to see that the paraphonic is like blinking. But there's two different modes. If it's like fading in and fading out, this means that this oscillator is going to be on this kind of a morphing stage. Now, once you click it, it's going to go on and off and on and off. So then you press and hold the range, and now it's not morphing anymore. You can use it a more classical way, you know, like changing waveforms, just going up and going down. Right? And notice that this will work for these oscillator number 1, but if you don't do it for the oscillator number 2, this one stays on morphed. Now with the square and the tone mod, you get a one extra control that you don't get with the other ones, which is going to be the width. So if I go and make just play a square right there, with this one you can mess with the width. And you can manually do it, of course. You can go, you know, very thin, or you can go the other way and get it like that. Now, of course, this is a pretty standard control. Now, if we go to the tone mod right there in the middle is gonna sound a little bit crazy. So the tone mod is something that we can, you know, we get metallic sound out of this. Now, the thing is that with the width, if you go all the way down, you're kind of getting like a normal saw, right? It sounds like a saw and looks like a saw. Now, as you go up, of course, you're gonna be messing with that symmetry. And notice that it starts breaking right there in the middle, right there. And then as you keep going up, notice it's getting closer to perfect symmetry. It's not perfect, but it's almost there. But the whole point of this tone mod is that you get this metallic sound. Now, one thing that you need to know is that the width of both oscillators are pre-wired. So a lot of the things are pre-wired. So the width of both oscillators are connected to the LFO. So by doing something, you can modulate the width of the width of this control of the tone mod and the square. Now by default you don't get it, right? So I'm gonna go up on the rate just a little bit so we can, you know, hear a change. Still we get nothing, and it's because the attenuators are going to be controlling the you know, the connection between the LFO and the width of the oscillators. So the attenuator number 1 is not connected or pre-wired to anything, but the attenuator number 2, it's pre-wired to the LFO that's going to control the width of the oscillators. So if I go to both, right, I'm gonna maybe select a blend between both. Let me do a C or something like that. Let me do a C. Something like that. There we go. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to right there. And notice that as I go up, notice that we get an LFO. If I change the rate, we can hear that. And maybe if I go to a normal square and go down, notice that we get that motion. So the attenuator will do that because it's pre-wired to the LFO and then controls the width. All right, so the next thing is going to be the tune and the range that you get right here. Of course, and this is pretty obvious. I'm going to go again all the way to the 1, and you can do 32/8 in this case, then 32/16, right? Pretty simple. I feel I don't need to explain anything. Now the thing is that, of course, the tune control is very sensitive. So you can go 12 up or you can go 12 down, right? Pretty simple. But then you're going to need to kind of adjust it, and it just takes a little while. So just to get it, you know, in tune. And this is a synthesizer that you kind of need to use, or it's better used with the tuning. You know, with some tuner, or maybe on a DAW, you open a plugin, so you see what you're doing, what you're tuning. Now, the companion app that you get with Neutron has a kind of a built-in tuner, so you can see it. Which is not a bad thing because this can do a lot of things, especially with the patch bay. So moving the tune that easily gives you access to getting different sounds. And for me, you know, it's a good feature. Now, some people kind of hate this, you know, that the tune is so sensitive, and it's kind of a, you know, it's kind of a problem. So you have a trick for this. If you go right here and do range and paraphonic at the same time, notice that this will start blinking. So this means that if I play something, the tune, this control, is completely disabled. So we cannot use it. It's just disabled. So now the tuning is being controlled by of course, the synthesizer. And if you press a C, it's going to be a C. Now, but you need to make sure that when you get it from factory, it's the tuners or the oscillators are tuned up behind the scenes, you know, right there. You need to open it and do the tuning yourself. If not, you're going to need to send it to tech to do this. But it's a very simple task. You can, I believe you can find it on the manual. Now, the thing is that, of course, you can go this one, you can disable this one, and you can keep this one enabled. So if you do a blend, something like there, notice that you can still control the tune of that one just to get different sounds, right? And if you want to get out of this mode, you can press range and paraphonic at the same time, and it goes away. Now, another thing that it's very cool that you can do with this one, when you tap it one more time, you are gonna go into full range. So if I go, notice that we can sweep the full range. And we kind of, it's like going in frequency mode. We are not kind of doing semitones anymore. And it's just sweeping the full range. And one cool thing is that you can go all the way down. So it means that you can turn both oscillators into LFOs, which is something very, very useful when you do the patch bay. So the oscillator number 2, it's completely the same, but now we're going to talk about the paraphonic mode. And for this one, I'm tuned on C, just pretty much on the same oscillator mix. We are on the, the middle. And then I'm using a triangle to get, something different. And I'm doing 16s. And on the oscillator number 2, I'm doing a square, but I'm doing 8 on the range. And this is because we're going to talk about the paraphonic. So if you don't know what it means, this is more duophonic, but if you don't know what it means, when you play a key, both oscillators are going to play. But the thing is that you can divide and play 2 keys. Now, this is a monosynth. You cannot play 2 keys because you don't have voices. What you have is oscillators, but you have a single voice. So when you play a key, both oscillators are going to play. Now in paraphonic mode, when you play a key and then you hold it and then you play a new one, that new key is going to be using reusing the other oscillator, which is going to be the number 2 in this case. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to go right there. And remember, the oscillator number 1 is that triangle wave. And this one is going to be the square. So it's a little bit more annoying. Yeah, right? We have more harmonics. So if I go right there and just play a key, notice that we get both at the same time, right? Now what happens if I play a new key? It's going to replace it? Well, on paraphonic mode, that's not what's going to happen. Notice that the lower C is going to be the triangle and the higher C is the square because, remember, it sounds a little bit more annoying. You have more harmonics. Now, the paraphonic mode works best when you're using or you know how the note priority works on this synthesizer. We're going to talk about that in a second. But by default, the note priority is going to be last. So it means that the last key that you play, that's the one that's going to be, kind of changing to the oscillator number 2. So if I do again, play, we get both at the same time, oscillator number 1 and the 2. If I play a key, it's going to use the 2. And you need to kind of be very aware that if you play a third key, it's going to replace that one, right? So they see this one that I was playing, it's not playing anymore. As soon as I play that one, it's going to replace it. So the last key will always dispose the previous one. So you kind of need to play in very staccato mode. Now there's that right there, I made a mistake. And now every time I play in a higher note, I kind of make sure that it's a square, or is the oscillator number 2 in this case. But again, notice I'm playing very staccato. If I made a mistake and do that, it's going to replace that note, right? So you need to make sure of what you play and that you're not just missing your keys. Now, the thing is that you have the note priority. We're going to talk about that in a second. And it's going to change how the paraphonic mode behaves. And you get an extra option for the paraphonic mode that is going to make this a little bit easier. But first, let's finish with the oscillators, and then let's talk about that one. So what you get next after the paraphonic is going to be the oscillator sync. Now, if you don't know what this is, now the oscillator number 2, this one is a slave of oscillator number 1. So what it means that again is that the frequency of the oscillator number 2 will restart to be in sync with the number 1. So, of course, this is a very classic kind of a type of sound. So the trick with this one, if I go to sync, and we are going to be kind of use the same thing for both. I'm going to go there, and I'm going to go to a square. So we are pretty much doing the same thing on both oscillators. So you get that sound, kind of a a kind of a hard sync sound. But the thing is that it's not a very pleasing sound, and that's, you know, how the sync works. Right? Now, the thing is that the trick is when you start modulating the frequency of the oscillator number 1. So if I go there and I move this, notice that we start getting different sounds. Remember that the oscillator number 2, it's being restarted to be in sync with the number 1. This is the slave and this is the master. So when we change the frequency, we are not detuning the whole sound. If I go out, you know, I'm going to play something. If I disable this, notice that it sounds out of tune, right? Sounds very out of tune. And as soon as I go to the sync, since this one is being synced to the number 1, we are not going out of tune, of course. And again, the trick with the oscillator sync, if you're using the same thing and you're very aligned, it doesn't sound that well. When you start modulating the frequency or LFOing the squares or, you know, going to different sounds, that's when you get, you know, a very rich sound for, with the oscillator sync, you know. Now, of course, right here, we can do a lot, but not a lot with the oscillator sync. Everything works with the patch bay. So you really need to learn how the patch bay works in order to get, to get more juice out of the oscillator sync. Okay, so I'm back to a default patch. So now what we are going to do is talk about the note priority. So basically you have two modes, of course, with the synth is the mono and the paraphonic. We know that. Now, first we're going to start with mono because you get a different it works in a different way on both modes. So first we're going to start with mono, no paraphonic. So by default, Neutron, and we already talked about this, is the last note priority. That's how it works. So in mono mode, it means that if you don't know what it means, if you're playing one key, notice that the keyboard, I'm playing one key, and then I play a new key, and on this one we are playing both oscillators at the same time. If I play a new key, that key is going to replace the one I was, holding. And if I play a new key, that one is going to replace the one I was holding. Now if I play a lower key, that one is going to replace whatever note I was holding. So that's how the last note priority works. Now the thing is that you have a low note priority and you have a high note priority. So the thing is that how can you access them? So you can access to the app of the synthesizer and you can easily change them from there. But how can you do it from the synth? So if you press and hold the oscillator sync, notice that if I press and hold, this ones start blinking and you have 3 positions on the filter. You have the high pass, the band pass, and the low pass. We're going to talk about the filter in a second. But the one in the middle, the band pass, it means that you are on the last note priority. Now, if you play the mode right here, you're going to be changing to low note priority. And if you go to the high pass, it's going to be high note priority. So we already know how this one works. So I'm going to go to the other one, which is the low note priority. And this one is very simple. It means that if you are holding a key and you play a higher key, it will not just trigger anything. I'm going to play that key and then I'm going to be playing higher keys and notice that nothing happens. If I go and play a lower key, that one is going to be replaced. That is going to be the new note. So then the other one, the high note priority, is going to work pretty much the same way, but the opposite. So if I play a note right there and I play lower notes, nothing is going to happen. Nothing will trigger those notes. Now, the envelope will not trigger, so we get no difference. So if I play a higher note, then we get it. Okay, so now let's talk about the same thing, but with the paraphonic. And I've changed the oscillator number 1 to be a triangle, and then the oscillator number 2 to be a square, and I'm doing 8 and 16. So we are doing the same example we did before. And this is because the priorities work in a different way, because now we don't have just last. We have last, we have low priority, we have high priority, and then we have a new one that we're going to talk about in a second. So how the paraphonic mode is going to work with all of this. and it's going to work a little bit weird. So I'm going to go to oscillator sync. I'm going to hold it, and remember the middle one is going to be the last. So this still works like you know what we did before. I play a note. We are doing both at the same time. I'm going to play a key, and that's going to be the square, 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 square. Cool. So, you know, what's going to happen with the other ones? I'm going to go with to the other one, the low note priority. So I'm going to play a key, and we are playing both. If I play higher notes, that's going to be the triangle now, right? So pretty simple. Now, if I go to the other one, is going to be the high note priority, and this is a little bit weird, and it works the same way as the last note priority. If I play something and I do the same thing, notice that we get the triangle at the top. All right, so now the thing is that after a little while, Behringer released an update to the firmware. Maybe because people complain, I don't really know, I'm just guessing. And they added a new kind of a mode to the Paraphonic, which is actually, you know, a new mode for the Paraphonic. And this is going to be the high-low note priority. So if you press it right there, notice that the first one and the lower one are going to be lit, are going to be just, you know, blinking. So this means that you are on the fourth mode that only is available when you go to Paraphonic. Right? So now if I do the same thing, I'm going to be playing, and if I play a higher key, notice that it works just like the last note priority, but it works a little bit better. Notice that I can play a little bit more freely. It's just much smoother than using the last note priority, but we get the same, you know, the same thing. Now, the cool thing is that if I go to a lower note, now we keep that, you know, we keep that relationship. Now the lower note is going to be the triangle. But the high and low works a little bit better than the last note priority, because in the last note priority, you need to play very staccato in order to not mess it up. Remember, and you know, we can actually do it again. If I go right there and I play something, I do something like that, and by mistake, I'm going to play a different key. I'm going to be replacing the one I had, you know, on the lower note, the lower C. But the other one doesn't happen, you know, we don't get this behavior. I'm going to play it, and I play a new note. It's going to keep it on the same oscillator. And notice I'm holding 3 different keys. So it works in a very different way, and you really need to kind of remember what all the different priorities will do, depending on, of course, what you're using. Okay, so I'm back to a default patch, and now what we need to talk about the filters. So we're going to start with this. Now notice I changed this to MIDI in. So thus far I was using the USB to control the MIDI in and out. So if you're using a DAW and you don't want to use the MIDI, the MIDI cable, you can use the USB to get sound to your DAW if you wish. Now notice on the spectrum that there is a little bit of noise right there. And maybe you're thinking, okay, so this is a noisy kind of a synthesizer. Well, no, that's the static of the USB. You know, unless you get an anti-static USB cable, which I don't have right now at my disposal, you're going to get that noise, of course. So, okay, so now we are back in the default patch. We're going to talk about what the filter can do. And it's a pretty standard filter, but you get 3 different modes. So if you go right there to the frequency and you play something, you're going to start cutting low, high frequencies because you're in low pass mode, right? So you're going to cut high frequencies. That's what the low pass means. Now you get the other mode, which is going to be the high pass mode. And on this one, you're going to be cutting low frequencies. It's just the same, but the opposite, right? Right. So you get the next mode, which is going to be the bandpass mode. And this is kind of a cut a little bit of the lows and a little bit of the highs. Now this gets a bit more obvious. Notice that you get kind of a bump right there. It's looks like a mountain right there. And you can, of course, move the frequencies and that it's going to move. Now, this is going to be a little bit more obvious when you do resonance. Right. So pretty simple standard controls. You get them on pretty much all synthesizers. And then you get, of course, your resonance. If you do a little bit of cutting and you add resonance, you're going to be adding a peak at the breakpoint. And notice that is a very resonant, control. Now, of course, when you sweep, you're going to start hearing that wow. Right. Again, pretty standard controls. So the main problem now is that if I play higher keys, since we are cutting a lot, we cannot hear them very clearly. So when you go to key tracking, this is going to create kind of a, like an envelope, let's say, on your keyboard. So the filter, the cutoff will react differently with the keys that you're playing. So if you're playing lower keys, it will react one way, but when you press higher keys, the filter is just kind of moving a little bit up so you can hear them a little bit more. So that's, the main difference of key tracking. And if I turn it off, notice that the higher keys, which is super dark, which is, not a problem. It's just how it works. Now, the bad thing, you get a lot of things with the synthesizer. What you don't get is a way to kind of decide how much key tracking you want to do. It goes from 0 to 100. So there's no in-betweens right here. Well, that's, one of the bad things, but you get so much good with this that we can kind of let that one slide. So then let's talk about the other controls, and you have 3 different modulations, sources. Right here, you get this one, and it's the LFO. This one is the envelopes, and you get a hidden one. So this one is the LFO. If I go up, notice that the LFO and this rate is going to be modulating the cutoff frequency. So we are kind of doing something like this. If we go to a triangle, for example, we're just going up and down, up and down. And of course, different waveforms will give you a different sound. We're going to talk about this when we reach to the LFO section. I'm going to go all the way down. So this control is going to be the envelope. So if I go right there, maybe I do with this one, I provide a little bit of attack, and by default, it's using the envelope 2. I provide a little bit of attack. It's going to kind of slowly ramp up. Right, so this is the second modulation source for the filter. Now, for now, I'm going to go all the way down, and we're going to talk about this in depth in a second. So you get the third mode, and I want to talk first about this one. Now, the third mode is going to be the mod wheel, the velocity, or the aftertouch. So yes, you can do that. So the thing is that it's hidden. You can access through the app of Neutron, or you can go right here and long press the VCF mode. And notice that, things will change. This will start blinking. This will change a little bit and it will start blinking, and the ranges will start blinking. So what this means is that whenever you're on the first one, on the high pass, the first one is blinking, it means that you can select what it's going to be modulating the frequency, the cutoff. So the first one, and notice that you don't get a first one, and you're gonna be moving this with the ranges, not with this control. You're gonna go range up or range down right here. If I go all the way down, I'm not going to the sine wave. And it's because the sine wave means nothing. Now the triangle means that this is off. Now it's doing nothing. Now the next one, which is gonna be the saw means aftertouch. The next one is going to be the mod wheel, and the next one is going to be the velocity. So let's say I want to use the mod wheel, right? So I'm going to go and select the square. That's the mod, the mod wheel. So what this can do is that now you can kind of control the frequency with the mod wheel. Notice I'm moving my mod wheel right now. Right. So pretty easy to do. Now the other options is going to be aftertouch. Now if you want to do a little bit of aftertouch, I'm going to need to disable the keyboard because right now I'm using some plugins and they are kind of in between. Let me just disable them. So the aftertouch, of course, if you have a keyboard that supports aftertouch, is whenever you press something and then you press harder, it's going to kind of do that motion. It's going to do that modulation. And I'm using a key step right now, key step 37 from Arturia. Right, so that mode is going to be the aftertouch. And the other one, the last one, is going to be the velocity. So if I play very softly, I get, less modulation. But if I play harder, I get much more. Now, the thing is that for now, right now, it's going from 0 to 100. And let me just show you with this one, with the square, which is going to be the mod wheel, right? So if I press something and I go from 0 to 100, it's very quickly going to, going to the whole range. So it's a little bit too aggressive for this. So you have the second position right here. So if you go right there, you are going to be entering into the other mode, which is going to be the filter mode, the mod range. The mod depth. And this is the filter mod depth. Notice that right now we have a different thing right here going on. We don't have just single positions selected. We have all. And this means that the filter mod depth, it's 100% is what, we are using right now. I start from 0 and then it goes all the way to 100% if I go up on the mod wheel. But, you can change this. Now, how this works, it's on steps. It has 64 steps. So you can need to tap. And notice that as you tap and you go down, they start to fade. And it's because you are going down on the mod depth. So you can press and hold, and it's just going to go a little bit more aggressively. I'm going to go and maybe put it right there. That's going to be about 40%, pretty much. So now the mod wheel is not going to go to 100%. Just going to be smoother. Going to go to full, and we get much less. And if we go, a little bit down, if we go down to there, maybe 20%. Now notice that again, it's not too aggressive. It's very subtle. So you can, of course, control with the mod wheel velocity and aftertouch, and you can, on top of that, control how much depth you apply to this modulation. So for now, I'm going to go back to defaults. I'm going to go all the way up, and I'm going to go right here to the first position, and I'm going to say that I want to turn this off. And once you are done, of course, you're going to press and hold, and you're going to get out of this mode. Right, so the next modulation source is going to be like the main one, which is going to be the envelopes. So the envelope 2 is the one connected to the frequency cutoff. So let's say that I want to play something and I want to do something like every time I play a key, right? I just want to kind of modulate this control every time I play a key. Now, remember that this is a family show, right? I'm recording this video for all audiences. So maybe this is your first synth and you don't know how, you don't have really clear how ADSR works. I'm just going to give you a brief explanation. So the control, of course, this knob can be modulated that fashion, going up and then going down. Now, the thing is that we need something that decides how it's going to move. Now, the envelope depth is going to define or decide how much of this effect we want. In this case, I'm going to go to 50%. Now, then you have these controls, the ADSR. And for now, I'm going to go all the way down on the sustain, which is the S. So attack, decay, sustain, release. Now, the attack and decay are time knobs. So the attack is going to decide how slow we go up. So if I wanted to modulate this control up and then go down every time I play a key, the attack is going to decide how slow or how fast we go to reach the upper part of whatever we want to do. So if I go right there at the bottom and I do something, we don't get much. I'm going to do a little bit more envelope right there. So what I want to do a little bit of modulation right here. And notice that it's doing something. It's super fast. Now, if I go slower, this is going to be how much it's going to take to get from here to how much amount we are doing, which is going to be around there or something, something like that. That is just going up. And if we provide a little bit of resonance, it's going to be a little bit more obvious. If we do it slower, it's going to go really slow up. And at some point, it's going to go back because that's, what it wants to do. It wants to go up and then go back to the beginning. That's what we are doing. We are going up on the frequency, and at some point, it's going to quickly, go back to the beginning. Now, how we can go back to the beginning is going to be the decay. Remember, these are time knobs. If I go up, is going to slowly go back to the initial point. So if I do this, it's going to slowly up, and then it's going to slowly go down. Now, if I go it really fast, it's going to be super fast. Now, if I do it slower, right, we get that motion. That's how, the AD works. Now, then you have the sustain, and the sustain is not a time knob. It's not going to take an amount of time. So let's say that you want to go up right here. You want to go up, and then you want to go down. But maybe you don't want to go down all the way to the beginning. You want to maybe stay right here in between. So that's what the sustain is going to do. It's going to go up and then go down, but instead of going down to the initial position, it's going to stay at some point. So if I go up, notice that now it's not going all the way back. It's kind of staying right there. And if I go up on the sustain, it's going to stay up higher, or it's going to stay up lower. Now, one thing that you need to know, if you do sustain all the way up, is going to disable the decay stage. It's going to go all the way up, and it's going to stay right there at the top. Right. So if the attack is going to be how long it will take to go from one point to the next one, the decay is going to be how long it's going to take, from that point to go back to the original source. The sustain is going to be how, where we're going to be sustaining or staying at. The release, is going to be what's going to happen when we release the keys. So right now, if I do something and I'm doing a little bit of sustain, we go up, we go down, and we stay at that point. And if I release the key, the sound dies, right? And the sound dies completely. And we are using this envelope. This is the amp envelope. We're going to talk about this later. But the sound, pretty much fades out really quickly. So that's the release stage. What's going to happen when we release the keys? So the release is like the attack and decay, is a time knob. So if I do something and provide a larger value, it's going to take a little bit to go off. Now notice that it's not happening. And it's because on your main envelope, which is the envelope that controls the volume of your synth, it's all the release, it's all the way down. So you need to have some release on your envelope 1, the amp envelope, in order to have some release on the filters. So now if I do it again, it's going to go all the way down, and I release it, and it will slowly go down, right? So that's how the envelopes work for the filter. Okay, so then you have the other envelope, which is the envelope 1, and you have the VCA bias. So this envelope is going to control the VCA, pretty much. It's going to control the sound that comes out, right? With the envelope 1, we will control how the frequency cutoff, this knob is going to move. And notice that I'm back to a default patch. This one is going to move, and this envelope controls the sound, the volume. So if we do the same, and the attack, decay, sustain, and release work the same way it works on the envelope 2, with the cutoff, but this will work with volume. So maybe right now, if I press something, it's just a little bit too aggressive. So what we can do a little bit of attack, and the volume will just kind of rise. It's just going to be a little bit more smooth. Now then, if I provide no sustain right now all the way up, we will have no sustain. So it's going to go up, and then the volume is going to die, just like it happened with the envelope 2. Now, if I want to provide some instruction, when we go down in volume, it's going to go up, and then it's going to slowly go down. And when we are done with this instruction, the sound is going to, of course, die. Now, what happens if we don't want the sound to die? So then we go to the sustain, and we add a little bit of sustain, and the sound is going to go up. Maybe I'm doing too much. Let me do it again. I'm going to go up. The sound is going to go down, and then it's going to sustain at some point. And this is a level control. Notice that if I go down, we get less level. And if I go up, we get more level right there. Now, if I release the keys, the sound dies right away. So we get the release keys, the release control, and this is going to decide how the sound will fade out. And remember, all of this is just volume. And now the sound is fading out, right? So that's the envelope 1, is how we control the VCA. Okay, so pretty simple, pretty straightforward controls. I'm going to go to the default ones, right? To the default, kind of a default patch. So then you get your VCA bias. And this is something that you don't get on a lot of synthesizer. Now, what you can do with the bias is going to kind of bypass whatever we are doing right here. Notice now, if I start playing keys, But notice that the sound is not dying. I'm gonna go to something more simpler right here. Simple to hear. Maybe I'm gonna go to that one. Notice that we get a constant sound, right? And maybe I'm gonna go to that one. And I do a little bit of filtering, so it's not that annoying. Okay, so notice I play. And we get that sound right away. And this is because this is going to open, you know, the envelopes. So it doesn't matter if I go right here and do something, you're not gonna get it. Now, of course, what you can do a blend of both. Right now they are open, but if I go to 50%, we are gonna be using some of the envelopes, and notice that the sound changes. But if I release the keys, there is a constant sound because it's just opening a little bit more. So then again, this could be useful to have something, you know, going kind of a right there at the bottom, you know, something playing at the bottom constantly. And then whatever you play at the top, you know, at the top of this, is going to trigger the envelope. But then, of course, the sound is going to sustain. That's what the VCA bias pretty much does. Now, if we go all the way down, we are back to just controlling whatever that comes out of the synthesizer with the envelope number 1. Okay, so I'm back to a default patch, and now we need to talk about the LFO. And the LFO can do a lot of things. It looks very simple, but it has a lot of hidden features. And we can access through them by, you know, doing a combination of different buttons. Okay, so let's start, you know, first covering, you know, what the default behavior is going to be. So by the default, the LFO, it's pre-wired to modulate the cutoff frequency, this one. And remember that it can also modulate the width of the oscillators through the attenuator. If I go right here and I just maybe put this one right there, and this is going to be the control that's going to be allowing to modulate the cutoff frequency, right? Pretty simple. Now, of course, you have waveforms to decide how this, you know, motion is going to happen. So right here, you can, of course, be changing the waveforms, and notice that you have a morphing mode. So you're going to be morphing through different waveforms, right? So all of this is just very simple. Then you have the rate, and the rate is going to decide how fast or how, you know, how slow you go. Now, one thing that you need to notice is that the rate control has a sweet spot. If I go right there and I go all the way down, notice it's super slow. And I'm not all the way down. If I go all the way down, it's pretty much disabled. So I'm doing a little bit of a kind of a volume or control. I'm doing a little bit of value, and it's still very slow. Now, as you get to the 50 or maybe 40-ish%, it's going to get super fast, faster, 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 and at some point, after 50%, it's like super fast. Like, I mean fast. Right, so remember, if the rate has a sweet spot right there, so you need to kind of, you know, very, very careful with that. So then the other option is the key sync. So right now, if I do something, we are getting that, you know, motion with the sine wave. And right here, of course, the waveforms are the classic ones, kind of the same ones we get right here. And the only difference with this waveforms is that right here you get a saw, and the other one you get an inverted saw, which is a ramp. Right. So now you get this key sync. Now the key sync, what it will do, it will restart the LFO every time you hit a key. So right now, and let me just give you a good example. I'm going to go to a square. Now this square, it's like an on and off kind of a, you know, motion. It's on and off. And if I do it a little bit slower, it's on, off, on, off. Okay. So, of course, if I, you know, press a different key and, you know, notice that the keyboard I'm using right there on the, I'm pressing, maybe I'm going to go to a C3. Notice that sometimes it's going to be off and sometimes it's going to be on. And this is because the LFO behind the scenes is constant. It's not re-triggering. It's just going to go and, you know, it never stops. It doesn't care if I'm playing new keys or playing, you know, a key. It doesn't care. It's just going to go and do its thing. Now, the key sync, what it will do, it will tell the LFO that every time that we hit a key, a new key, is going to restart from the original position. So it starts all over. So now if I do the same thing every time, notice that we don't get the same sound. And it's because the square is an on and off kind of a fashion. So we will not allow the square to get to the off position because we are restarting the waveform every time we play a key. So this is, kind of important. Depends on what you want to do. Maybe you have a different waveform. And the other one, if you play, faster keys, sometimes it's going to go down and maybe that's not what you want. So the key sync maybe will give you some time. Notice it's just giving you a little bit more time and you're always starting from the same position. With the other one, it's just, it goes. And sometimes you're not gonna go to get the same sound because, you're on the lower part of the waveform. Yeah, that's the key sync. Okay, so far you get very standard controls, and I'm gonna go all the way down. So you get very standard controls and nothing really super awesome. Now, just like with the VCOs, you can disable the morphing, right? Right now, notice it morphs to through the different waveforms. So you can disable this, So you can go right here, and the key sync is like the entering the sub menu of the LFO, and we can do a million things with this. Once you press and hold the key sync, and notice if you remember the VCOs, if we take a look at the Paraphonic, notice how it's moving. It's smoothing on and off. It's very smooth. So this means you are in blend mode. So if I tap it, now it's going to be on and off, just like the square. So the mode now is going to be, instead of blend, is going to be switch. So if I could have do something like that, it's going to switch, right? Same thing we did with the, the oscillators. So another thing that we did previously, just like, the change of the morphing, is the mod depth. Remember, we were able to assign the mod wheel or maybe the aftertouch or the velocity to modulate the cutoff, right? So with this one, we can do something similar. We can provide an instruction, or we can tell the LFO how much of this depth will be used behind the scenes. So yeah, okay, so let me just give you an example. If I go all the way up and I'm maybe using, a sine wave, that's gonna be cool, and I do something and I'm gonna go faster, notice that the motion is very aggressive. And this is because, of course, we are all the way up. So if we want to do less, I'm gonna go and do a little bit less, and we have a smoother kind of a, modulation. Now, behind the scenes, you have a control to set the depth for this one. So I'm gonna go and press and hold the key sync. And now notice that we have the same thing we did previously with the filter mod depth. So the ranges are you get those 64 steps, remember? The same thing we did before. So we can go all the way down, and maybe I'm gonna go there. That's gonna be about maybe 30%, right? So when you get out of this one, now this control is gonna be relative to whatever value you select right there. So this is going to go from 0 to 100, but of that 30%. So now if I do something, notice it's very subtle. The movement is very subtle. And if I go all the way, the modulation, it's not that aggressive. So that's what you do with the LFO mod depth. You're going to be deciding how aggressive this knob is going to be. So if I go all the way up again, notice it's very aggressive. Or if I go all the way down, or maybe somewhere in between, it's a little bit smoother. So for now, I'm just going to go all the way up, right? I just want full. Now, if you keep pressing hold the key sync, you're just getting out of that mode. So you have more things that you can do. You have the one-shot mode. Now, I'm going to go again to the key sync, and we are entering this sub-menu. So right here in the BCF mode, notice that the first one, the high pass, is blinking. So this is like the default mode. Now, the second mode is going to be the one shot. And there's one important thing. If I turn this off, if I get out of this menu, notice that the key sync is off. So for the one shot to work, the key sync needs to be on before we access. Or, we can turn it off afterwards, but it needs to be on. So now if I go to the sub menu, notice that the bandpass mode is selected, not the first one. So this is the one shot mode. If I get out of this means that now the LFO will not, will not loop, and we will not get this, this motion, constant motion. It's just gonna, do it one time. And I'm pressing one key, gonna do it one time, and then it's just not gonna do it again. So this is the one-shot mode. And this is kind of useful if you're just playing maybe some keys and you want to, maybe, let's say we want to ramp up the volume or doing something like that. Something like that, or maybe you want to do the other thing. And you get more kind of you get that motion and you get it just once. It's just not looping through the same thing over and over again. So you don't need to worry a lot about the rate. So this is, of course, the one-shot mode, and make sure that you have the key sync on, because if you turn the key sync off, you're going back to the default mode, which is the looping, right? The standard LFO. So you can, of course, go right here, press and hold, and notice that it's still on one-shot mode. So the one-shot only works when the key sync is on. Now, if you press the mode again, now we are back to what we had from before. So we have the one-shot disabled, so it doesn't matter if we do key sync on and off. We're just going to get that loop, the normal kind of a modulation. Okay, so then we have more. So you have the LFO key rate, and this one is kind of a cool. If I, for now, I'm just going to be, turning this off. And if I just press and hold again, you're entering that sub menu again. So you have this key track now. So the key track, what it will do when you press and hold it, it will kind of let your keyboard or maybe whatever is that you're playing decide how fast the rate is going to go. So let me just show you, and you're going to need to kind of pay attention because it's just a little bit weird. So what you need to do is to go to the key track and press and hold. And you need to press and hold, right? So I'm going to press and hold. I'm not going to release it. So now I'm going to go and play a low C. So that's going to be like my default, my default starting, my default frequency. I'm going to start from that frequency. And now what you need to do is you need to release the key track without releasing the key that you're pressing. So I'm going to release it, and I'm still pressing the key, and then I'm going to release the key. So what this is going to do is that now if I play that low key, we get that, that motion on that rate. But as soon as I go up on the keys, it's just going to go faster and faster and faster and faster. So it's going to multiply the rate. Right? So pretty cool. It could be really useful. Now, maybe you don't want this, you don't like this. How the hell can you, how the hell can you disable this? So you need to go to the key track, you press and hold for, maybe a couple seconds, and then you just release it, and you're back to default mode. Okay, so we have a couple more things. You have the, on the one-shot mode, you have a legato and then it's staccato mode. Now, first we need to be on one-shot mode. So if I go right there, we are on one shot. If I got, if I get out, the one shot is off because we have the key sync, off. And if I press and hold, we know that we are on one shot. Now, if the key track, and now we are not going to press and hold, we are just going to turn on and turn off. So if the key track is off, it means that we are in staccato mode, meaning that if we play and hold the key, and then we play new keys while we are playing or holding actually that key, the LFO will not retrigger. Now, if the key track is on, it will retrigger. And notice that right now the play modes kind of play a part right here. So I'm going to be on the last of the, the last note priority, and I'm not doing duophonic, of course, or paraphonic. So now it means that it's off, right? So it means that the envelope will not retrigger if I just, play a key. So I'm going to go and just play it. I'm going to go and do that. And remember, we are in one shot mode. If I play a new key, notice that nothing happens. It's not retriggering, right? So if I go to the other mode, now what it will do, if I press and hold and I play a new key, it will retrigger the envelope. Just will retrigger the LFO and the envelope. And that's the difference. Okay, I'm gonna go back to kind of the default. Actually, I need to go back to the other one, which is the first mode. I'm going to go out of the sub menu, and then you're just back to the beginning. Now, there's one more thing I need to show you, which is something that it's, it's like the most common question that you get about the LFO. And it's the question is if the LFO can be synced to your DAW through MIDI. So yeah, you can MIDI sync the LFO to your DAW, to your session. So what you need to do, you need to go and press the key sync again, press and hold. And now the oscillator sync is going to be the control for this. So if the oscillator sync is off, this one is off, it means that the MIDI sync is off. So the clock is going to be whatever you do right here. You know, this is the internal clock. It's just not going to listen to your DAW. It doesn't matter which BPM you have. Now, if you turn it on, now it's going to be key synced to your DAW. So let me just gonna go to the DAW and enable the clock right there. And notice that I have 110 and the MIDI sync right now it's on. And notice that the tempo is a little bit different. If I turn this off, now notice now it's different. And it's because it's using the internal one. It's not listening the 110 BPM. If I turn this on and I go right here and start changing the tempo, notice that it's doing the MIDI sync. If I go up, it's going to start, you know, it's going to change the rate. All right, so that's the way you can do MIDI sync. Right, so now we're going to talk about the envelope retrigger. So notice all the things that you can do, and we still need to cover the rest of the synthesizer and the patch bay. So the synth is just, pretty great for a low budget synth, and that's, it's just my opinion. So you get the staccato and the legato mode, and this works with the envelopes. So first I'm going to kind of need to go to a default patch and kind of provide a good example for this. So I'm going to go to the frequency, I'm going to go kind of all the way down, and I'm going to be modulating the cutoff, and I'm going to do a little bit of resonance, and I'm going to go right there to the envelope number 2, and I'm going to provide a little bit of attack, a little bit of decay. The sustain is not going to be all the way up. I'm going to go maybe there, and then I'm going to go maybe there, and then I'm going to go there, right there, and a little bit of sustain, not all the way up, and the same thing with the volume. So I'm pretty much doing the same envelope right there. So now if I play something, notice that we get that kind of a plug, starts and ends right away. Okay, so every time we play something, we can hear the envelopes doing their job, right? Right, so now, of course, we get the oscillator sync. If I press and hold, we can enter the legato or staccato mode. Now, if the key track will be on for legato and off for staccato. Now, right now, it's the key track, this one, it's off. So it means that we are in staccato, right? That's the main idea. So now with the key track off, I play a new key. Notice that the key, of course, the envelope, it's doing its job right there. And if I play a new key, notice that the envelopes are not retriggering, right? So that's what we get from the envelope. But if we make it more aggressive, we get that, initial motion. And if I play new keys, we don't get that. So that means that the envelopes are not retriggering. Now, of course, we can change this behavior by going to the key track. And if I turn it on, we are in the other mode. So if I play this and play a new key, notice that the envelope will retrigger now. And again, I'm making this obvious. That's why, it doesn't sound that good. And the other mode, it's very different. So that's the legato and the staccato mode. And of course, you need to use them. It depends on what you're going to do, of course. So if you want to get out, you press and hold and you get out of the menu. Okay, so now we need to talk about the overdrive. And now things are going to get a little bit easier because we don't have a lot of submenus. It's just going to be the controls that we have right here. So the thing is that the overdrive, what it does, how it works, and we already talked about this at the beginning of this guide, is that the sound will go through the BCF, then it's going to go through the filter, it's going to use the filter to modulate, then it goes to the overdrive, and then it goes to the, it goes to the envelopes, to the amp. And then, of course, it goes to the delay. So the thing is that the overdrive is kind of right there. So if we kind of use the overdrive, it's going to kind of change the sound. Right now, we are bypassing, of course, the overdrive. So if we disable this, and I'm going to go down in volume for now. If we disable this, I remove the patch bay, we are going to be using the overdrive. And the overdrive has a very specific sound. So if I play something, notice that now the volume is really low. And this is because you have a drive and you have a level. So you have a different stage of gain right now. So I'm gonna need to go up a little bit, but what you can do, you can go up in the level of this one. Now the drive is going to be, is a soft clipping. The overdrive is a soft clipping, kind of an overdrive. Now, but the more you drive, the more you're gonna clip, and we can see this on the oscilloscope. If I go maybe to a triangle, something a bit easier that we can see, maybe that's gonna be my triangle, something like that. That's the triangle, and let me go to a range of 16. Okay, so now we have the drive. If I go all the way down to the drive, remember that we are gonna get less and less. Even though you're doing some level, you're just not getting much. And if you go down all the way on the level, you're not going to get anything. So you need to provide some level in order to get some out. Now, if you provide the drive, notice that now the sound goes up and we are not clipping. And at some point, and I'm going to go down, this one, sorry about the camera. If I go up on the drive, it's going to start clipping the sound. Notice that right there, we go to distortion. So we are clipping that waveform. But notice again that the sound gets louder. That's why you get a level, so you can control your levels. Right? And it sounds very different. Notice that the triangle sounds very saturated now. And of course, if you put more complex waveforms, or maybe something like that, and you overdrive the hell out of this, it's just gonna, it's gonna sound a little bit different. Right, so it's a super cool overdrive. Now, of course, you need to love it and you need to handle it well. One thing that you get with the overdrive is the tone control. And you might like the tone control or not. So this is what it does, and right now I'm going to go to something a little bit more normal. I'm going to go to 16 and maybe, I don't know, a saw right there, kind of the default patch. I'm going to go up volume, maybe in level as well, maybe not level, volume. Notice that we are not doing a lot of overdrive. If I go up, we're going to get a little bit more sound. There we go. So the tone control, what it will do, it will give you more bass or it will give you more highs. So yeah, it's a tone control. And it works just like, it works on any overdrive pedal, that you get the overdrive, the drive, and then you get the tone. You can adjust the tone, like a good tube screamer, for example. This kind of works the same way. If I go all the way down, notice that the sound is going to get darker. So we get more low end, which is cool, but you are sacrificing the high end. Now, if you go all the way up, you're going to get less low end. You're sacrificing your low end, but you get high frequencies. Right. So this is, of course, what the tone knob does. If you use it at the middle, you're going to get a combination of two. So now you can use the overdrive to kind of create or, to get kind of an EQ, a shelf EQ, maybe a tilt EQ is going to give you more high end, a little bit less of lows, or maybe get more lows and a little bit less of the highs. That's how, a tilt EQ works. But again, it's just a standard control that you get on, many overdrives. Okay, so now let's talk about the delay. The delay is something very simple on this one, so I'm not going to do a lot, and I'm not going to give you a lot of information because it's very simple. It's a bucket brigade delay. Now, if you don't know what bucket brigade means, it means that the repetitions are going to be darker. And the bucket brigade makes sense. Let's say that you have a brigade of, a bunch of people, and they have a bucket, and they are passing water, through one bucket to the next one bucket to the next one. So what happens is that as you go through the different stages, you're going to lose a little bit of water, right? And it kind of makes sense. So right here, and I'm just giving you a dumb example, of course. So right here, what you get in the bucket brigade is that the repetitions are going to start losing definition. And that's how a bucket brigade, delay is. And this is an analog delay. It's not a digital delay, which is something super cool. So with the mix all the way down, you just get nothing. If I go up, you're going to start getting less volume because you get more of the delay. which remember is darker and less of the, the original sound. Now, of course, you get your time control, and the time control is going to be the amount in milliseconds. Notice that we get that. Now, the repeats is going to be your feedback control, also known as feedback, and it's how many repeats you're going to get. If you go up on the repeats, notice that you get more repeats. There you go. So you can see on the spectrum right there that we have some noise right there, and this is, that peak that we have right there on that frequency, on the higher frequency, that is the USB. Now, notice that on each repetition, and we can really see it on the spectrum. On each repetition, we get less high frequencies. So this is how the bucket brigade delay works. And if I go all the way up, and I'm just gonna listen to the, to the bucket brigade delay, notice that we lose high frequencies. We have a little bit of noise because it's just analog. Alright, so that's how it works. Now, of course, you can go all the way up on the feedback, and you're gonna start getting feedback, just like with any delay. And then right here, I'm not teaching you anything. This is a pretty common kind of a, sound. So, of course, this is an analog delay. So what you can do, you can maybe start going to that feedback scenario and then start modulating the time controls. Okay, so I'm back to a default patch, and now it's time to talk about the sample and hold that we have right here. And notice that we kind of changed the view, and now we are looking a little bit more to the patch bay. It's because we want to use it a little bit more now. So if you don't know what sample hold, it's kind of a way of saying random in simple words. Now, what it does, it will take a short snapshots from a waveform or from a sound source, and it will use that snapshot to provide a value. That value, it will be used to provide some kind of modulation, to provide an instruction. Now, of course, this is snapshot, the sample and hold, has an internal clock. That's why, it goes right here. It has a rate, and notice that the light right there, it's just lighting up, and it's because it has an internal clock, and it's deciding how fast it's going to take this snapshots. Now, again, this is a family show, so maybe you're starting with this and you have no idea what the sample and hold is. Let me just give you kind of a real life example, or something that you can relate to. Let's say that you go to the mountains, and I always provide do the same example. Let's say that you go to the mountains, right? And you have the mountains right there in front of you. You get your phone and you put it on that multi-mode where you press and hold the button and you take multiple pictures in 1 second. You can take 100 pictures while in 1 second while you're holding the button of take the picture of the phone. So this is going to be some kind of a, like the sample and hold. So if you grab the phone, you put that mode and you start taking pictures and you look at the mountains, you're going to get 100 pictures of the mountain. All right. Now the mountain, it's something static. It will not move, right? So what happens if you start moving your phone up and down, left to side, and you start moving your phone while you're taking this 100 pictures? So then you take a look at the pictures, and all the pictures are going to be different because you are kind of moving the phone. You're moving the phone. So the sound source, in this case, the mountains, are kind of moving. So now you are going to get different pictures. So this different pictures is what we use, in this case, is sample and hold, to provide an instruction. Now, by default, the sample and hold will use the noise as a sound source. In this case, the sound source is the mountains, right? Whatever it is that you're looking at. The phone is going to be the sample and hold in this case, right? So whenever you get the pictures, you're going to use these pictures to provide an instruction to modulate something. So by default, it uses noise. Why? Because noise is an unpredictable sound source. So that's why the sample and hold is a way of saying random. And this is because, if you're using noise as a sound source. On this one, what you can do, since you have a patch bay, you can decide what the sound source is. And by default, it's just noise. Okay, so of course, all of this, let's just, take this into practice. So right now, the sample and hold, it's not connected to anything. So it doesn't matter if I play something and let me go out volume. If I play something, it doesn't matter if I go up and glide or up on the rate. it will not do anything. So, of course, what you will need to do is need to use the patch bay to provide these instructions. Because right now, notice that the sample and hold is taking these pictures. And this is how fast it's taking this, pictures or snapshots from the sound source, which is noise. And right now, I'm going to go all the way to glide, down on the glide. We're going to talk about that in a second. So how can we use it? So if you go to the out right here, you are going to find the sample and hold, the S and H, right here. So what you want to do, if you want to use it, you're going to be patching in or, putting there the sample and hold. And now you have on this instructions, all these snapshots that it's taking following the rate. And they are all different because it's using noise. So now you're going to be providing a random instruction to something. So maybe what you could do, well, let's say that I'm going to go to the oscillator 1 and 2. So this is going to be the pitch of the oscillator 1 and 2. So if I patch it right there, we are providing a random instruction to modulate the pitch of the oscillator. So if I play something, notice that it's modulating the pitch. And let me go up in volume. Right, so we get this random behavior because it's using noise, which is an unpredictable sound source. Right, of course, how fast it's going to take this snapshot, so how fast the changes are going to be, is going to be the rate. If you go slower, the changes are going to be slower. If you go super fast, you're going to get this, kind of a, if I go to a higher pitch, you're going to get this kind of computer sound, very 80s. And that's what it does. Of course, you plug your sample into your SNH to whatever you want. Let's say that you want to do something else. Let's say that you want to do your resonance. So if I go right here, notice that now the resonance is being modulated. And it's random. It's unpredictable. Let's do something more visual. Let's say that you want to grab your shape right here and you want to modulate the shape. So this is going to be the shape of the oscillator 2 and this one, the 1. So if I go right there, notice how this one is moving. It's just moving on a up and down. It's modulating this knob on a random fashion. So that's what the sample and hold does. Now, right now, let me just, give you a different kind of example. I'm going to go back to the pitch, right? So if I go to the pitch, all the changes are very abrupt, right? And if I go slower, it's going up and down, up and down. It doesn't care. It's just going to different instructions. It doesn't care what happens in between the changes. So this is going to be the glide. The glide is going to smooth the transitions between the changes. So it's kind of smooth the transitions. As you go up, of course, you're going to get that gliding sound. That's why it's called glide. Right, so let's talk about the next one. You get the slew rate and the limiter. So slew is also known as lag or portamento. Notice that you get the porta time. And this is very similar to the glide. So they are kind of all siblings. They work in a different way, but they are very related. And at some time, somehow they're just going to do the same thing. But it depends on what we do and how we use them. We provide a different name for it. Now, let me just, again, give you an example. So right now, this slew rate does nothing. So the slew is not connected to anything. Now, the porta time, it is connected to your keyboard. So, for example, this is going to be your glide control, your portamento. So if I play a low key, just going to do something. But now if I play a higher key, it's going to slide or glide to that note. And if I go more, it's going to be, of course, a bit more aggressive. So remember when we were using the sample and hold, that we used the glide to kind of smooth the changes? Well, the porta time is doing something like that. But in this case, it's just listening to the frequencies on your keyboard. So when you change the frequency, it's going to kind of slowly, gradually go and transition to the new frequency that you're playing, which is, the other key. That's how the portamento works. So all of them, they're just kind of related. Now, if you go all the way down to the porta time or the portamento, of course, you get nothing. Now, then the other one is going to be the slew. Now, the slew, just like the sample and hold, behind the scenes, it's not connected to anywhere. So, has no pre-wiring. So you need to connect it to something. So the slew works just like the glide. We can smooth these changes, or maybe the portamento, we can smooth the changes. So since we need to patch it, we are going to need to kind of, grab a sound source and then smooth it out. And if you notice right here, you see on the patch bay, right here, you have the slew in. So all of this are outs, and all of this are ins. So if you think about this, what we need to do is we need to get the out of something, go through the slew through this knob, and this knob will just kind of round the corners. So let's say I want to do an LFO. So I'm going to patch this to an LFO, right? So I'm going to go to the LFO, and I'm going to maybe do a square, something, that goes on and off, something predictable. So I'm going to go and grab the LFO, this one, and I'm going to patch it to the slew in. So now the LFO is going through the slew. So now the slew is grabbing the instruction that the LFO is providing, and it will just, kind of smooth the transitions. Now, the thing is that right now, we are not going out to anywhere. We are not doing any other modulation. So we need to go out to somewhere, somehow. So that's why you get the out of the slew. The LFO goes in, and then it needs to go out from the slew to someplace else. So what we're going to do what we know, which is the pitch of the oscillators. We're going to go to 1 and 2, and I'm going to go right there. So now the LFO, remember, it's a square. So it's an on and off kind of a behavior. So if I play a key, and I go down on the rate, notice that it's kind of a super aggressive, right? So maybe what happens if I want to change, you want to, kind of provide a different change or something on the changes. So if I go to this slew rate, it's going to glide the changes. Now the LFO is a little bit too aggressive. So when we modulate the pitch, it's kind of going into low frequency mode. There we go, low frequency, and we can actually, go slower and see this. There, now it's on low frequency mode, because we are modulating the pitch, way too much. And then, of course, it's going to go super high because this is a square, right? But now the changes are not going to be, kind of on and off or one or the other one. You can kind of a transition or add a smoothness to, the changes. There you go. Now, of course, if we go faster, it's just going to be a better sound, right? If I do nothing, it's just on and off, and a little bit of slew is just going to make it a little bit better. Right? So that's it. That's what this slew is going to do. So all of these ones are kind of the slew, the porta time, the glide, lac, or portamento. They're all kind of siblings. They are kind of related on what they do. They work in a different way, and depends on the synthesizer, they do different things, but they are kind of all related. All right, so now we need to talk about the attenuators. So I'm back to a default patch, of course. So we already kind of know one attenuator, and it's the width. We use the number 2 to modulate the width. So the LFO goes to the attenuator, and from the attenuator, we go out to the oscillator width. So that's, how we can, modulate the width of the VCOs. So we kind of already know an attenuator. And this is, of course, pre-wired. Now we can change this, but we're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about how this works. So, okay, so the attenuator is like a level control. It will kind of attenuate something. It kind of makes sense. That's why it's called an attenuator. So the 2 is already connected to the width. So we cannot use that one unless you kind of use the patch and you override the pre-wiring, which is something that you can do. Now, the number 1 does nothing. It's not connected to anything. So the 1, it's free. It's free. It's just completely free. So we can use it. So this works like the slew. We grab something, we go through the attenuator, and then we go out from the attenuator to someplace else to provide, an instruction, a modulation. So let's kind of take something that we know, right? And again, we are back on a default patch. So we get that sound. So again, we need to go, for example, I'm going to go from the sample and hold, And I'm going to go to the oscillator 1 and 2, right? I'm going to provide some rate, maybe something higher. And we get, you know, the modulation of the pitch. We know how it works now. Now the thing is that it's a little bit, could be a little bit crazy, right? It's just maybe too much. So what we can do, we can attenuate it, and that's the whole idea. So I'm going to go out of this one, and now this needs to go to the attenuator end. We go out from the sample and hold, we go through the in of the attenuator, and then, of course, right here we get ATT1 and ATT2. So this is the out. So we're going through, we are modifying the behavior of whatever modulation we want to do, and then we just go back, we go out to whatever modulation we want to do, right? To provide. So in this case, is the oscillator 1 and 2. So now if I do the same thing and the number 1 for the attenuator, it's just all the way down. So we are just going to get the same thing, or we get nothing. And notice that we get no modulation. So that's what the attenuator is going to do. It's like a mod depth control. Let's say that it's like a depth control. So as I go up, it's going to start providing this instruction, and then more, and then more, and then more, until we get the full modulation. So that's why it's called an attenuator. We attenuate whatever instruction that we go through, we pass through it. All right, so let's say that I want to do the same thing with an LFO, you know, with the same example that we did before. I want to go out from the LFO 1, the only LFO we have, and I want to attenuate it because maybe it's just, you know, a little bit too fast. So now we are going, and if I go right there, let me just go directly with the yellow. We are not doing anything with the attenuator. We are going directly to modulate with the LFO and the square, you know, same example we did before. And it's, you know, again, going very low and then very high at the same time. So it's way too aggressive. So what if we could attenuate it and get a better, you know, modulation? So we're going to go out of the LFO, same trick. We're going to go ATT1 in, and then we go out of the attenuator in, and we go back to the oscillator 1 and 2. If I go all the way down, of course, we get no modulation, but now we can control it. We can control the depth. So now it's not going to go all the way down and all the way up. Unless, of course, you go up and it's going to be more aggressive. And if you go up, you're going to kind of be on the same place where you were before. Right? So the attenuators are just a great thing to have on any modular, or in this case, semi-modular synth. Okay, so we covered most of the synth already. Now, you do have some other functions. Amazingly, you have more functions on a very simple synth. And there's that we didn't cover the patch bay. I'm going to do that in a couple of days. I'm going to release a video about only using the patch bay. But it kind of makes sense that you need to understand what's going on right here in order to do things with the patch bay, right? Kind of makes sense. So you have more features. The thing is that those features are not accessible through the synth. You are going to need to connect the synth via USB to your computer and use the Neutron app. You have an app that you can download and install it, and the app will access and enable some features that you cannot use. You cannot get right here. So, for example, this is going to be the Neutron app, right? Notice that all the things that you have. And it's pretty simple, and we kind of already know everything that it does. The blend modes, the tune pod, this is going to disable or enable. The oscillator range, you get a tuner as well right here. And also you can enable oscillator sync, the paraphonic mode, and you have some other options that we cannot, accomplish from the synth, like, for example, the Autoglide. So we know that we can glide with the portamento time. If I go up, we can, go there, and we could go all the way up and all the way down, right? We know that's how it works. So, okay. So what if I want to do something different? Right here, you get the OSC1 and the OSC2 Autoglide. And notice that you get semitones. You can go plus, and if you go the other way, you can do minus. So this means that you can, of course, provide an instruction of, I don't know, +5 of Autoglide. And when you press something, that is going to be gliding. Now, in this case, nothing happens. And it's because you're going to need to provide a little bit of portamento time. Now, if I go to the first oscillator, because we are doing it just to the first oscillator, we get that sound. If I go to the other one, since we enable this mode, notice that it's not gliding unless I press and hold. Right? But if you're not pressing and holding, you are going to get the glide on the other one, and that's the whole trick. I'm not going to press and hold, and notice that we get the glide. And we only get it for the oscillator number 1. So this is something super cool. Let's say that maybe I want to go to 32s, something lower on the oscillator number 2, and I'm going to keep that one on the number 1, 16 on the number 1, and maybe I'm going to be gliding from minus or from, to plus 12, 1 octave. So when I press a key, you're going to get that, and I'm going to go up. You're going to get an effect that you cannot achieve with, a lot of synthesizers. So you can go negative instead of going plus. Right now we press a key and it's going plus, from up, down, from up to our fundamental note. But what we can do, if I go to negatives, it's going to start from low frequency, from an octave lower, and then glide to the root note or the key that we are pressing. So it's going to be like... Right? Just a very cool feature to have. So on the app, you get the oscillators and all of the options for the oscillators. Then you have the LFO, the filtering, and notice that you have the different sections of your synth. And at the end, you have options. So right here, you can assign the MIDI channel or the MIDI device. In this case, you can even change the note priority, remember? And if we change it to Paraphonic, notice it's giving us that extra, note priority. So you can do the envelope retrigger, which is something that we did. And right here, you can disable the MIDI dip. So you can do a lot of things that you cannot do on the other ones. This one is something that we can do. But what we cannot do is to change the pitch bend range. So right here, you can change the range of your pitch bend right there, right? So something could be really, really useful. Let's say that you messed everything up and you changed a lot of the features on your synth and you don't know how to go back. You can restore it to default settings, right? With this button. This is super cool. Now let's go up and let's talk about something else. This one, the OSC2 key tracking. So this one, it will disconnect the oscillator 2 from the keyboard. So it's going to play a fundamental note, or maybe a root, or maybe whatever you select right here with the tune note, because it's going to disconnect it and from the keyboard, and then you can play a melody at the top. Now let me just give you an example. I'm going to go right here to 32, which is something low, and I'm going to go high on the other one. And remember that the play mode's kind of a matter right here. So if I do oscillator key tracking, and I go to the oscillator number 2, I'm going to press a key, and I get that. And if I press a new key, I get the same sound. Remember, it's disconnecting the keyboard. So the only thing that it's listening is the trigger. So we can only trigger, then this is because we trigger the envelope. But the sound, the frequency, is always the same. You're disconnecting the keyboard. So now you can go right here and change your fundamental tone to, I don't know, something else. And the other thing that you get right here, if you go to your other oscillator, the other oscillator, it's listening to the keyboard. So you're going to get a fundamental tone with the oscillator 2, and then the other one is going to be listening. So maybe you can do a melody and you will get always a constant sound. Notice that we hear the low frequency right there. We are in 32. So think of a the bagpipes, you know, the Scottish bagpipes, that they always play a fundamental note in the background and then they play a melody on the top. Well, this is kind of that thing. We have a fundamental tone and then we are playing a melody right there on the oscillator number 2. So you can use it that way if you wanted to. So all the things that you cannot do from the synth is to reorder the shape of the LFO. And this is something super cool. So what you can do, instead of having this order, you know, when you move the knob and you go in this order through the different shapes, of course, you can change how that works. So I'm going to go right here and say that maybe I want a square. Then on the next position, I want a square. Then I want, I don't know, a sign. And then I'm going to do a sign and then I'm going to do a square. So now when I toggle this, when I move this knob, this, the saw, the triangle, and the inverted saw are going to be bypassed. So when we move this, notice that it's not going there. It's only, and yeah, let me go there. He's only toggling through the different, you know, the two we have selected, which is, you know, very useful. Let's say that you want to kind of do something with this, or maybe you want to, I don't know, modulate the LFO, because this LFO is going to be modulating something else. So I'm going to be patching, you know, the LFO. And I'm going to be telling the LFO to modulate the shape of itself. So if I go right there, notice that it's going to be modulating the shape. But the order is going to be that one, right? It's not going to go to the other ones. Now, maybe if I select a different one, or maybe I add a new one, you know, that one is going to be added to the equation and it's going to toggle between these three. And it's going to be done in this order. So you can change, you know, you can reshape the order of the LFOs, which is something super cool, mostly when you're, you know, creating patches or creative patches, where the LFO is going to do a lot of modulation. So, okay, so right here, what you can do, you can reset the order. So the other thing that you can do with this one, which is really cool, is going to be offsetting the face. Okay, so let me just give you an example. Let's say I'm going to go to the square. Right here, we are on the number 4, which is going to be the square. Now, maybe I'm going to go to this one, to I'm going to go to the saw. So I'm going to say that I'm going to offset by 0. So I'm going to grab the LFO out, and I'm going to be patching this in to the shape of the oscillator number 2. So of course, I need to make sure that this one is right at the top, just to give you, you know, a view of what this is kind of doing. And I'm going to go a little bit down on the rate. So what you're doing, you're offsetting the phase of the waveform. So notice that when the lights on, the instruction starts from the start and then moves down, and it's kind of in sync, right? It's perfectly in sync. Now, what happens if you offset it? So if you offset it, you're going to start to be you're going to offset the link between them. So if I go right here, and I maybe offset it by something, maybe 180, notice that they are not, you know, kind of in line anymore. The light and the movement is still the same movement, but it's just a little bit different. All right, so let me just give you a different example. Maybe, you know, since this video is already too long, I'm going to give you a different example. So we are back to the default patch, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of modulation with the LFO, and I'm just going to move the frequency knob with the LFO. And for now, I'm just going to go back to 0. And I'm going to enable key tracking, right? So as soon as I play a key, of course, the modulation will begin. In this case, I'm going to go right there to this one. And maybe I can just go to key sync and disable the mode. So I can go and, you know, just change it. So now we are not a kind of a blending. We are just going through the different waveforms. So now I'm using a saw. So it means as soon as I start, of course, the saw has that instruction and then ramps down. So as soon as I press a key, the instruction will begin, it will move it, and then will slow down, right? That's, you know, what it means. So if I play a key, we instantly hear that modulation, because that's, you know, what the instruction is. I play a key, it will do the LFO and then start over and over if I hold the key. But every time I play a key, it's starting always on the same position. We hear the transient, right? What happens if we offset it? I'm going to go to the offset And maybe I'm going to do, I don't know, some 90 just to do something. Or maybe I'm going to go a little bit too aggressive so you can hear what is going on. So when you have set it, now it's not going to start from the peak of the waveform. It's going to start from the tail. And then, of course, it's going to go to the peak because you are offsetting. So now if I play a key, I don't hear it, and then I hear the initial transient, which is the peak of the waveform. And as I'm playing now, and I get a part of this. Now, if I do less, you're going to hear the tail of the modulation, and then it's going to start over from the peak. Right? So that's why you want to offset it. So after you offset, it's just gonna go in loop and you don't notice it. But when you press a key, it's just starting in a different mode, in a different way. You can go faster, and it's gonna start in a different way. Now, of course, you can go to maybe 315. That's going to be a lot. So it's not a lot of difference. Just like going back to the beginning, it's just very small. But when you do lower values, you are going to be catching the tail of the waveform and then, get the initial start. So that's why you get the offset. And it could be useful, when you do modulations as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you the last thing, and then I'm going to call it a day because this guide was, already too long. But, we kind of learned everything about the synth. We just need to learn the patch bay. That's the next thing. So you have more options right here. And at the top, when you go to the oscillators, you can see the key split. And this is a nice feature that you can use with the Paraphonic mode. Now, it's a little bit kind of hard to understand because this is kind of linked to the play modes. I'm going to go to the play modes and I'm going to make sure that this is last, especially when I go to Paraphonic mode. I'm going to go to last, right? Which is the default mode. So when you split the keys, you're going to say, okay, so whenever you do something after this key, I want you to do this. And if you go below, I want you to do that. And I'm going to go and just give you an example because, again, it's just a little bit kind of weird to understand. I'm going to go to C3, right? That's my kind of where I'm splitting the keyboard. So if I go maybe to right here and select maybe a triangle, and on the other one I'm going to do a square, and for now I'm just doing the same amount. Maybe I can go lower on this one so we can really hear the difference. So if I go to C3 and I'm going to disable this and go a little bit up on the frequency. There we go. Now we are doing this. So now I'm pressing and holding the C3, which is the breakpoint, right? Remember? So if I play at the top, we don't get a lot. The thing is that remember that the breakpoint is C3. So we are kind of playing on the same, on that division. So if C3 and above, we are just playing on the same spot. So now if I play a lower key, now below C3, and then I play at the top something, above C3, that's going to be the triangle. Now when I go below C3, which is the breakpoint, we're going to start getting kind of a both at the same time, right? Just different sound. And if I go above C3, so you can do this on very, on a different, you have different scenarios for this. Let's say that maybe you're doing something low right there, and then you're just playing your triangle right there to do your kind of a melody. And then at some point, let's say that you're entering to a part of the song that it's a little bit aggressive, and then you go above C3 and you're going to be doing both. And then you go low. Now, this synthesizer is just a great thing. And we just covered half of the synthesizer. We didn't cover this. And this can take you to a lot of different places. So we can do a million things with the front panel, and we can expand it with the patch bay by million times. So it's a great synth, and it's a cheap synth. So in my opinion, and and this is my opinion, this is a guide. I'm not a review, but I'm just gonna give you my opinion because why not? So I have all the synths. I have the Neutron, the Model D, the K, the Crave. I don't have the Pro one, but I had it for 2 weeks, to use it on track, and then I just returned it back to a friend. And of all the synthesizers, all these modules that they have, this one is the one I like the most because you can get whatever sound out of this. You can do a million things. Maybe not whatever, but you can do a million things. The other ones are just a little bit more static. The K2, of course, is a take of the MS-20, and you have the patching, so you can do crazy stuff right there, but not as much as this one. This one can go crazy. So yeah, that's just my opinion, right? If you want to take it, take it. If you don't, don't. All right, so in a couple of days, I'll be uploading a new video just talking about the patch bay, and it's going to be long because we're going to go one by one, providing an example, and then I'm going to explain what everything does right here. And it's going to be available in a couple of days. Now, of course, remember to like and subscribe if you find this precious and you learn something. This takes a lot of work. The recording, the editing, the preparation, the camera, the lights, and everything takes a lot of work. If you really like this, of course, remember to like and subscribe. And if you have the money, you can afford it, check Patreon so you can support the channel, and I can keep doing this because everything is just fine, kind of a funded with my own money. All right. So maybe if you want help, you can go to Patreon just 1 month and help me out. All right, man. So thank you for watching and see you on the next one.